Okay, so hi y'all, I'm Pangea Kali Virga. I am an artist, a fiber artist primarily, and sustainable fashion designer. Do a lot of public art making, both collaborating with the public and yeah, teaching the public, lecturing, things of that nature. And everything that I do is upcycled, and all my fiber art is zero waste. So I'm just gonna scroll through this really quick. So I've always loved fashion. That's kind of how I started. I did fashion my entire childhood, and then I went to college for it, and then was like, you know what? I'm gonna be a farmer. And and did farming for a few years, which was really amazing and ended up really inspiring the practice that I have now, where I was able to kind of combine my love and interest in nature, plant ecosystems with fiber and fashion and things of that nature. So keep scrolling. After I was done farming, I started doing textile design, and a lot of my textiles were inspired by nature. Then I moved to the Midwest. Funny enough, I was farming on the coasts. Then I moved to the Midwest and started putting on these big fashion shows that incorporated a lot of other local designers, very often using sustainable things, mainly for financial reasons, not necessarily like sustainable reasons. But by doing this and learning how to put on fashion shows, it gave me the skills to put on the fashion show projects that I have in Miami that I'll explain a little bit. So here's some of my collections that I made while in the Midwest. This was before my sustainability adventure, but I wanted you guys to kind of be able to compare stuff that I'm using new materials for versus the things that I'm using upcycled materials for. Actually, this collection was very upcycled materials.
Delayed on the screen share.
Okay, so I will pause for
Yeah,
just a sec
pause
for it
it
to
while
catch
it's
up. Yeah, so at this point, I was really couched in the traditional fashion industry. So not only like new materials, and I had my own brand, which obviously I was just producing myself. So, you know, ethical labor as far as that goes. Um, but I was also doing things for larger fashion companies, which is in another few slides. And in that position, in those different positions, whether I was styling for magazines or big companies for their campaigns, or actually doing like head of production work for larger fashion companies, it was really jarring to me, just like all of the abuse, whether it was like the abuse of labor, the abuse of the planet because of dyeing practices, or just like excessive amounts of production, you know, making a million things. Hi, Tonki. Yeah, or even the photo shoots, right? Like every week there's a new photo shoot for a new line of products, and you know, fashion companies used to just have, you know, maybe 2 collections a year, and now, you know, there might be up to 10 collections a year, or if you're a fast fashion brand, 60 collections a year. So by working in the traditional fashion industry, I really got a front row seat to these just like horrible practices. And yeah, so you can see all of these things that were some ethically made, some not. And I'm just gonna kind of keep scrolling here. Yeah, so this is Sport L. I'll let it kind of scroll, get there. Um, this was a company that I was working for as head of production. And so it'll get there in a minute on your screens. But I was working with a lot of factories in India and China. And so like really had this like total transparent view into how most of our clothes are like really made. And I got an even more close-up view when I moved to Vietnam, which is where I lived before I moved to Miami. So we're almost getting up to the present day. I'll just wait for this to get there. It's almost there. In Vietnam, I was head designer for a brand and was also in the city of production. So everything was designed in the same place that it was also being produced. And there were like 500 tailors. And it was my first time like really being on factory floors. And there was like some contention between the head designers, which were myself and really amazing French woman, and like our ideas concerning labor and payment and the rest of the staff. And so there ended up being yeah. the relationship that people had with their clothes in many different countries. So obviously people's relationship with their clothes in Vietnam, and just even living in different cities in the United States and seeing how people like treat their clothes, their attitudes towards like heirlooms or mending, or like even trends and the cycle of trends, how fast those are. My travels have really illuminated my understanding of that in the fashion world. Okay, so this is Vietnam. So you can see some of the things made while there. My office. All right, okay, and then now I'm in Miami. I know your screens are still lagging a little bit, but I'm gonna talk about Miami while on the present day. So when I moved here, I noticed that there were no sustainable fashion designer communities. Like there was just nobody bringing anything together. So everybody was doing their own thing, but they didn't know of each other. I didn't know anybody when I first moved here. So I started putting on these big fashion shows and I called them Miami on Site, and they were public, they were free. We often raised money for things like Habitat for Humanity, and I had them in like big outdoor public spaces that also incorporated public art. And I would invite, over a dozen sustainable local fashion designers to come and present their collections. And opposite to what like Swim Week does or Miami Fashion Week does, the whole teams were local. So very often for those other shows, they'll fly in models, beauty teams, etc. Everybody was local. Even the music that we played, it was either done by local bands or we had like playlists of local musicians as well. So really trying to like create a economical fashion industry here, for the public to engage with those designers, but also for the designers to be able to know about and support each other. And then the pandemic happened. They were called Miami on Site. So you can see Miami on Site. I'll put it in the chat. But you see like a 3-minute video of one of our shows at the design district for Basel. Yeah, Miami on Site, and it's just on the homepage.com. Okay. So next thing. So then once I started doing those, like, okay, well, obviously I have to make my own sustainable collections. Can't just put on these shows and just be a hypocrite. So I started making things for my own brand, zero waste. And then from that, my first collection was zero waste, simple, but I was using new materials. And then from then on, from that first collection, it's now zero waste and fully upcycled. So materials I'm using are sourced from the community. Maybe it's like a bright hems every 6 box, from all their wedding and dresses. Maybe it's another sending. It's leftovers from a swap that I hosted as part of my arts programming. Maybe some of my clients, they'll be like, oh, you know what? I want a new dress and these are my old garments. Turn these things into something new. Things of that nature. So you can travel at your point at the Deering called All Girls Come Forth, and that was where the clothes were upcycled and also made out of plants. And then they hung on kind of like wind chimes almost for 3 months outside in the elements, because I want people to also acknowledge that your life cycle of anything, but your clothing in this case, is always before you come in are introduced to this piece of clothing, and after, once it's been discarded, whether it landfill or otherwise, like what happens, because really kind of everything ends up in landfill most of the time, clothes related or incinerated. So like what does that really look like when your t-shirt is outside, and physically much more resistant than you think they are. Even the plant clothing, all of that's held up, and still looks new, you know? So that was really wonderful. And a lot of the stuff that trying I'm trying to like biodegradability and modularity. And modularity is something that I do often in my stuff, like a piece of clothing that can be worn many ways or, transformed into multiple things. My studio practice as an artist is also really important because it's creates a public space for people to come. So I mentor tons of people. My clients come, you know, for fittings to try things on. My collaborators come to discuss ideas. I do sewing circles and swaps and mending workshops and all sorts of things in my studio space and elsewhere, but I'll get to that in a sec. So this is my old studio in Fountainhead. Unfortunately that closed, and actually there's a Miami Herald article that just came out today. If you have the paper, it's the front page, you'll see my face on it. But it's also online. I can put that link in the chat too. That just kind of talks about the future of local art in this city without actual access to affordable studio spaces and affordable rents. So with that being said, that building closed, and now I'm in the studio that we're all sitting in right now, in Little River. And basically I just got a second. Okay, so if you want to, you can put in my name on Google Maps, Pangea Kali Virga, and you can always make an appointment to come visit me, to see my art and clothing, or to discuss ideas, or maybe you have a bag of clothing that you don't want to take to Goodwill. You can always take it to me and I incorporate it into my workshops and my I do a lot of costume design, which also thankfully gets to be really upcycled. And getting to like integrate sustainable practices into like theater or the dance worlds is really cool for me. I also do a lot of education. Okay, workshops and programming. We're almost done. I'm too busy. Yeah, so I do lots of mending classes and dyeing classes and just classes in general that teach people how to use their creativity to maintain the longevity of their clothing. I also do other art workshops that incorporate like making sculptures out of trash, things of that nature. But I really, really love the kind of help people upcycle their own clothing. And I also do stuff with the public schools, hospitals, botanical gardens, art museums. And I do a lot of programming with the homeless shelters too, which is like some of my favorite things to do. Okay, so this is the fiber that I make.
Wow.
Uh,
It is really.
yeah, I'll wait a second. I'll wait a second.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it's behind you.
Yeah, so I make a lot of fiber art. My fiber art is also really pertaining to the environment, or like my personal life. And I'm just waiting for it to load on your guys' screen so you can see it too. I do everything from like big quilts, and actually one of the projects that I have upcoming, I'll touch on it now, is I have a series with the Library of Sewing Circles once a month. Yeah, I've made kind of like protest banners out of upcycled materials to talk about the environment using like leaves of grass, Walt Whitman excerpts. Yeah, so all of this is like totally upcycled and zero waste. Like even those like little small motifs, I'm using my scraps and my like trash, my fiber trash, to make those items. Yeah, so the sewing circles, basically we're going to create a collaborative quilt over the course of 6 months. And that will be part of the library's permanent art collection, but it's going to be of a South Florida landscape. So the quilt's going to include like local native flora and fauna. So we'll learn about those things together while also learning about like natural dyeing techniques and like the history of quilting and like ability to use your scraps for quilt and fiber art. So those are some of the things that we'll cover. I also have a project called Ecotopia that's kind of ongoing. It's a utopia project where we're creating these kind of like town squares that are utopic, so very sustainable, lots of upcycled materials, things of that nature, that is both kind of up for application as well as for stores, community building. Really want that for like, but it ain't everything from like learning how to tie-dye clothes from the free store, and making picnic blankets with that tie-dye so we could have a community picnic together, or like using Vizcaya's plastic bottle trash that they sort and turning it into like this big sculpture garden, that we made as a community, including with some of the shelters as well. There's a great documentary that I'm making that's going to debut in December at Viscaya, that's going both documenting Ecotopia series, so it's going to be somewhat of like how to create your own, because that's my intent, not for it to just be like siloed to these commissioned projects, but that anybody can replicate the things that I'm doing in Ecotopia in their own communities. If you want to see the trailer, it's on my website on my Ecotopia tab. So pangeakali.com. Ecotopia tab. Actually, pangeakalivirga.com/. Oh, okay, sorry. Some of this is from unreason. So I have two more slides. Oh, I want to just share with you guys. Thank you for being patient for the last two slides. Let me share this one last time. Okay. All right. So some upcoming projects that I wanted to just mention here that some of y'all might be interested in is thanks. Okay. So I already mentioned the sewing circles at the library system. The first one's August 31st. I'll make sure to put it in that spreadsheet of the events and in the group chat. But they're free, open to the public. I'd love for y'all to come and work with upcycled materials to make this beautiful public art. I also am in the midst of creating like an artist residency program for one of the shelters so that there can be ongoing job opportunities for local artists and continue art programming for adults and children at the shelter, and also have an exhibition for said artists, both the student artists at the shelter and the like teaching artist. I just did something similar this year, and so I'm trying to work on that to kind of spread it out a little bit more so other artists can be involved. I'm going to do another fashion show before 2024 is up, probably in December at City Hall without City Hall knowing. So I want to basically go to a City Hall meeting for something that's really me, so some sort of an environmental thing. I have to look at their schedule, but basically have all of the models, which is just going to be the public, go up and speak one at a time, and that's the fashion show. And the clothes themselves will have like different statements on it concerning the issue and the environment in general.
The City of Miami City Hall?
Yeah, City of Miami City Hall. Yeah. So if anybody wants to kind of model for that, please reach out. I already mentioned the Ecotopia documentary. Oh yeah, okay. And then I'm an artist in resident at the Deering, and I have a solo show and programming coming up in 2025 for 3 months, and I'm getting married. And so this is gonna be like, my partner's like, let's elope. And I'm like, what if we have 2 weddings and one of them happens to be a public festival? So that's kind of where we're at, and that's all going to be like fully sustainable, upcycled. Like my goal for that entire programming is to make it fully zero waste. And so I've been making the steps necessary in the planning to make that happen. So that'll be open to the public. But as far as collaboration goes on that one of the things that we want to do, and this is like the only non-sustainable part of the project. So sorry. We want to create an AI language model that's only fed love. So we're going to be asking shortly for love letters, love notes, love songs, anything from you guys that you feel like expresses love that we're going to input into that language model. So it'll be this like kind of Miami-based love machine.
So fun.
As part of the project. Yeah, that's the only non-sustainable part. But yeah, if anybody wants to add their musings on love and peace. Did it just kick me off? No, I'm still there. Okay. I was like, I would really, really appreciate that. So it's all really labeled. I actually got all of these bins, mainly upcycled. And then some of it I got through this thing called the Surf Grant, CERF Plus. I forget what it stands for, but if you're an artist, it's emergency preparedness grants, and they're really amazing. It's actually open right now. So if you're an artist or you know an artist, CERF Plus grants, and it just helps you prepare for emergencies. I had flooding in my last studio. This studio also, it's Miami, sometimes things flood. So I have those bins and some other things that I got with that grant money to like help me prepare for emergencies. Okay, bye Michelle. This is my sewing machine. I have a bunch. These are all used as well. And then here, oh wait, should we show the quilts really quick?
Yeah.
All right. We've got, this is part of a triptych that I'm working on. You'll see the third work in the kitchen. It's nowhere near done, despite me working on it for a whole year. Okay, the kitchen. So this is one of the pieces that I'm working on right now.
Beautiful. I love the
Um,
reflection.
this is a Moroccan room. Hold up. I love this room. I'm just gonna,
Okay.
this is like my cozy area, but hold up. This is part of a series I did at the Botanical Garden. That was all like kind of art inspired by the flora there and Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. So those were kind of like protest banners. All right, we've got 1.5 more rooms left. All right, this is the showroom, so you can see the clothes all here. There's so much. Here you can see kind of all plants. Those are mango leaves that had dried. And then this is a piece, say hey, that I just finished, this big tapestry. Yeah. And I rent clothes. I obviously sell clothes and I do custom orders of clothes and I also do mending services. So if anybody ever needs anything mended, that's something else you can come to my studio for. And I don't even know if it makes sense to show my purse. And then one last room. This is my partner's studio. He's a musician and we collaborate a lot and he's making the score for the documentary and we do a lot of bookmaking together. So thought that was important. All right, that was the tour.